Subscribe now to receive daily miracles of Our Lady in your life. At 6 years old, Isabella Martinez had never heard her mother's voice. She had never heard the sound of rain tapping against the window of their small apartment in Tucson, Arizona. She had never heard a song, a laugh, or even her own name spoken out loud. Bella, as everyone called her, was born profoundly deaf, a silence so complete that doctors told her mother, Rosa, that without expensive surgeries and interventions far beyond their means, the little girl would live her entire life in a world without sound. Rosa Martinez worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. By day, she cleaned office buildings downtown. By night, she scrubbed floors at a medical complex on the south side of the city. She was a single mother, abandoned by Bella's father before the child was even born, and every paycheck disappeared into rent, food, and the mountain of medical bills that had piled up since Bella's diagnosis. Rosa had tried everything: audiology appointments, hearing aids that didn't work, consultations with specialists who shook their heads and suggested treatments that cost more than she made in a year. Eventually, she stopped trying. It wasn't that she stopped loving her daughter, she simply stopped hoping. Bella was a bright, beautiful child with wide brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. She communicated with her mother through basic signs, gestures Rosa had learned from a free pamphlet at the hospital, and through expressions, touches, and an understanding that ran deeper than words. But Rosa carried a quiet grief everywhere she went, a sorrow that her daughter would never call her mama, never sing, never speak the dreams that lived inside her heart. Every morning at 7:15, Rosa walked Bella to the bus stop on the corner of South 6th Avenue, a dusty stretch of pavement shaded by a single mesquite tree. The school bus would arrive at 7:30 to take Bella to the special education program across town. Rosa would wait with her daughter, then rush to catch her own bus to work. It was a routine they had followed for months, silent, predictable, and utterly ordinary. Until the morning, everything changed. It was early April, and the desert sun was already warm even at that hour. Rosa stood beside Bella, scrolling through her phone and mentally calculating whether she could afford to pay the electricity bill and still have enough for groceries. Bella tugged at her mother's sleeve. Rosa glanced down. The little girl was pointing toward the bus stop bench. Her face lit up with a joy Rosa hadn't seen in weeks. Bella was smiling at nothing. Rosa followed her daughter's gaze. The bench was empty. The street was empty. There was no one there. Bella pointed again, more insistently, and began waving as if greeting someone. Her mouth opened and she made soft sounds. Not words, but the kind of babbling that babies make when they're trying to mimic speech. Rosa frowned. Bella had never done that before. The child had always been silent, her world locked in a soundless void. This was new. This was strange. "Bella, honey, there's no one there," Rosa said aloud, though she knew her daughter couldn't hear her. She touched Bella's shoulder gently, trying to redirect her attention. But Bella pulled away, her eyes fixed on the empty bench. She giggled, a sound so pure and unexpected that it made Rosa's heart ache, and then she did something that sent a chill down her mother's spine. Bella's lips began to move, not random movements, not the clumsy attempts of a child who had never heard language. Her lips formed shapes, clear, deliberate shapes, as if she were speaking to someone, as if someone were speaking to her. And then, impossibly, Bella's little voice, a voice Rosa had never truly heard beyond cries and whimpers, whispered something that sounded almost like a word. Rosa froze. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the sidewalk. She knelt down in front of Bella, gripping her daughter's shoulders, searching her face for an explanation. Bella turned to her mother and smiled, then pointed again to the bench. She made a gesture Rosa didn't recognize, a sign they had never used before, and mouthed something silently, her expression full of peace and wonder. Rosa felt her pulse quicken. Was her daughter hallucinating? Was this some kind of neurological episode? She scooped Bella into her arms and held her tightly, fighting back tears. The bus was still 5 minutes away. Rosa glanced around the street, suddenly uneasy. Everything looked normal. The shabby storefronts across the road, the traffic light blinking yellow, the heat shimmering above the asphalt. But something felt different. Something felt present. The next morning, it happened again. Bella arrived at the bus stop and immediately turned toward the bench, her face glowing with recognition. She waved, she giggled, she moved her lips as if carrying on a conversation. Rosa watched in growing alarm. This time she crouched down beside her daughter and tried to see what Bella was seeing. There was nothing, just air, just sunlight, just the peeling paint on the bench and the cracked concrete beneath it. But Bella saw something. Bella saw someone. "Who is it, baby?" Rosa whispered desperately, knowing her daughter couldn't hear. "Who are you talking to?" Bella turned to her mother and made a sign, a sweeping motion from her head to her chest, then a gentle touch over her heart. Rosa didn't understand. Bella repeated it, more slowly, and then she did something that made Rosa's blood run cold. She pointed to the sky, then to her heart, and then to her mother. And she spoke. Not a babble, not a sound without meaning. A word, clear and soft and impossible. "Mama." Rosa gasped and stumbled backward. Bella had never spoken before. Never. Not once in 6 years. The doctors had been certain. Her auditory nerves were too damaged. Her brain had never learned to process speech. There was no way she could form words, let alone pronounce them correctly. But she had. She had just called her mother by name. Rosa's hands shook as she pulled Bella close, her mind racing. Was this a miracle? A medical anomaly? A breakdown? She didn't know. She didn't know what to believe. All she knew was that her daughter, her silent, beautiful daughter, had just spoken. And she was speaking to someone Rosa couldn't see. Over the next 3 days, the encounters continued. Every morning at the bus stop, Bella greeted the invisible presence with increasing familiarity. She smiled, she gestured, she mouthed words Rosa couldn't decipher. And each day, Bella spoke a little more. Short, fragmented words at first. Lady. Blue. Pretty. Then longer phrases, impossibly clear for a child who had never heard language. She says, "Don't be scared." She says, "You're not alone." Rosa stopped sleeping. She took Bella to an urgent care clinic where a nurse practitioner examined the girl and found nothing wrong. She called the special education coordinator at Bella's school, who suggested it might be echolalia or some kind of developmental leap, though she admitted she'd never seen anything like it. Rosa even contacted a neurologist, an appointment that would take weeks to secure and cost money she didn't have. But she didn't care. Something was happening to her daughter. Something beyond explanation, and Rosa was terrified. But Bella wasn't terrified. Bella was radiant. On the 5th morning, Bella did something that changed everything. As they stood at the bus stop, the little girl suddenly took her mother's hand and began pulling her away from the corner. Rosa resisted at first, glancing at her watch. The bus was due any minute. But Bella was insistent. She tugged with surprising strength, her face urgent, her eyes pleading. Rosa gave in and followed. Bella led her down South 6th Avenue, past the convenience store, past the auto repair shop, past buildings Rosa had walked by 1,000 times without noticing. And then Bella stopped in front of a small, unassuming building with a faded sign that read, "Santa Rita Free Clinic, Servicio Medico Gratuito." Rosa stared. She had never seen this place before. How had she missed it? Bella pointed to the door and looked up at her mother with absolute certainty. And then, in a voice clearer than any she had spoken before, she said 5 words that made Rosa's knees buckle. "The lady says go inside." Rosa's breath caught in her throat. Her vision blurred with tears. She looked down at her daughter, then at the clinic door, then back at Bella. The little girl smiled, a smile full of trust and peace and something Rosa couldn't name. And for the first time in years, Rosa felt something stir in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but the faintest whisper of possibility. She pushed open the door. Inside, the clinic was small but clean, with pale blue walls and a waiting room filled with families. A receptionist looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" Rosa's voice trembled. My daughter, she's deaf. She's never spoken before, but she just brought me here. I don't know why. The receptionist's smile softened. You're in the right place, Senora. We have a visiting specialist this week, a cochlear implant surgeon offering free consultations and surgeries for qualifying children. It's a program through the Archdiocese. We only do this once a year. Rosa felt the room tilt. What? You're the 7th family to walk in today, the receptionist continued gently. It's like a blessing. We've had people come from all over the city saying they felt called to be here. I don't know how to explain it, but it's been miraculous. Rosa looked down at Bella. The little girl was gazing toward the corner of the waiting room, smiling at something, at someone no one else could see. And in that moment, Rosa understood. Not with her mind, but with her heart. Her daughter hadn't been imagining things. She hadn't been hallucinating. She had been guided by someone real, by someone who loved them, by a lady in blue. Doctor. Samuel Ortiz had performed over 300 cochlear implant surgeries in his 20-year career, but he had never believed in miracles. He believed in science, in precision, in the measurable outcomes of well-executed procedures. He was a man of facts, not faith. And when the Archdiocese of Tucson had approached him about donating a week of his time to provide free surgeries at Santa Rita Free Clinic, he had agreed not out of religious conviction, but out of professional obligation. He had the skills. These families had the need. It was as simple as that. But nothing about this week had been simple. The clinic had been flooded with patients, far more than anticipated. Families who claimed they had felt called to come, parents who swore they had dreamed about the address, children who pointed to the building and insisted they needed to go inside. Dr. Ortiz dismissed it as coincidence, perhaps some effective grassroots advertising by the church. Yet even he couldn't deny the strange uniformity of the stories. Everyone described the same inexplicable pull, the same sudden certainty. It unnerved him in a way he wouldn't admit aloud. And then Rosa Martinez walked through the door with her daughter. Dr. Ortiz was reviewing patient files in a small examination room when the clinic coordinator, Sister Margaret, a brisk, efficient nun in her 60s, knocked and entered. Doctor, I have someone I think you need to see personally. He looked up, adjusting his glasses. I'm seeing everyone personally, sister. That's why I'm here. This one's different. Sister Margaret's voice was quiet, almost reverent. The mother says the child has been profoundly deaf since birth. No prior interventions, no hearing aids, nothing. But in the last week, the girl has started speaking. Clear words, phrases. The mother is terrified and confused, and frankly, so am I. Dr. Ortiz frowned. That's not medically possible. If the child is profoundly deaf, I know what's medically possible, doctor. Sister Margaret interrupted gently. That's why I'm bringing her to you. 10 minutes later, Rosa and Bella sat across from him in the examination room. Rosa looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow from sleepless nights. Bella, by contrast, seemed utterly at peace. She sat on the examination table, swinging her legs and humming softly, an eerie, tuneless sound that no deaf child should be able to produce. Dr. Ortiz introduced himself, speaking slowly and clearly even though he knew Bella couldn't hear him. He asked Rosa to explain what had been happening. She did, haltingly, her voice breaking more than once. She told him about the bus stop, the invisible presence, the words Bella had spoken. She told him how Bella had led her to the clinic, how she hadn't even known the place existed. Doctor. Ortiz listened with the detached professionalism of a man who had heard desperate parents grasp at straws before. He had seen families convince themselves of improvements that didn't exist, project hope onto random neurological quirks. This, he assumed, was another case of that. The mother was under stress. The child was experimenting with vocal sounds. There was nothing miraculous about it. Mrs. Martinez, he said carefully, I'd like to examine Bella and review any medical records you have. But I need you to understand that profound deafness doesn't simply reverse itself. If your daughter is making sounds, it could be developmental, It could be neurological, but it's not spontaneous hearing. Rosa nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know it sounds crazy, I know. But she spoke. Doctor. She called me Mama. She's never done that before. Never. Dr. Ortiz glanced at Bella. The little girl was staring at the corner of the room, smiling at nothing. He felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. Let's start with an examination. He conducted a thorough audiological assessment, testing Bella's responses to sound at various frequencies and volumes. The results were unambiguous. The child was profoundly deaf. Her auditory nerves showed severe damage consistent with congenital sensorineural hearing loss. There was no measurable hearing function whatsoever. By every medical standard, Bella should not be able to hear a single sound, let alone reproduce speech. And yet, when Dr. Ortiz asked Rosa to step out of the room and then softly said Bella's name, the little girl turned toward him and smiled. He froze. He repeated the test. Same result. He clapped his hands behind her head. No response. He jingled keys near her ear. No response. But when he spoke her name, quietly, almost in a whisper, she turned. Every time. Dr. Ortiz felt his pulse quicken. This didn't make sense. He ran the tests again. And again. The audiology equipment confirmed she was deaf. But her behavior suggested otherwise. It was as if she could hear specific things, voices perhaps, or certain frequencies, while remaining deaf to everything else. It defied every principle of auditory processing he knew. He called Rosa back into the room, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Martinez, I'll be honest with you. I don't have an explanation for what I'm seeing. By all measurements, your daughter cannot hear, but she's responding to verbal stimuli in ways that shouldn't be possible. I'd like to schedule her for surgery as soon as possible. A cochlear implant could give her access to sound, and if there's any residual neural pathway we're not detecting, we need to act quickly. Rosa's hands flew to her mouth. You'll do the surgery? Here? For free? Yes, tomorrow morning if you consent. Rosa broke down, sobbing. Dr. Ortiz excused himself and stepped into the hallway, his mind racing. He didn't believe in the supernatural. He didn't believe in divine intervention. But something about this case rattled him in a way 20 years of medicine never had. He needed air. He needed to think. As he stood in the narrow corridor, he became aware of a scent, faint at first, then stronger. Roses. Fresh roses, unmistakable and sweet. He looked around. There were no flowers in the clinic, no air fresheners, no logical source. The scent seemed to hang in the air around him, enveloping him like an invisible presence. Doctor. Sister Margaret appeared beside him, her expression knowing. You smell it too, don't you? He didn't answer. He couldn't. It's been happening all week, she continued softly. In different rooms, at different times, always roses. Some of the staff think it's Our Lady, a sign of her presence. Dr. Ortiz shook his head, forcing himself to focus. It's probably a cleaning product, or someone's perfume, Sister Margaret smiled sadly. If you say so, Doctor. That night, Dr. Ortiz couldn't sleep. He lay in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. He thought about Bella's impossible responses. He thought about the scent of roses. He thought about the families who had flooded the clinic, all claiming they had been called. And for the first time in his rational, ordered life, he felt the ground shifting beneath him. He didn't want to believe. Belief required surrender, required admitting there were forces beyond his understanding, beyond his control. But doubt was creeping in. Not the comfortable doubt of a scientist questioning a hypothesis, but the unsettling doubt of a man confronting something he couldn't explain away. The next morning, Bella's surgery was scheduled for 8 o'clock. Dr. Ortiz arrived early, reviewed the procedure notes, and scrubbed in with his usual meticulous care. The operating room was small but well-equipped, and his team, 2 nurses and an anesthesiologist, all volunteers, moved with quiet efficiency. Rosa had signed the consent forms with shaking hands. kissing Bella's forehead before the little girl was wheeled into the OR. "The lady in blue says it will be okay," Bella had whispered to her mother, and Rosa had nodded, choking back tears. As Dr. Ortiz made the first incision, he felt the familiar focus settle over him. This was his domain. This was where science and skill converged to change lives. He worked carefully, methodically, implanting the tiny electrode array into Bella's cochlea, connecting the internal device to the external processor that would allow her brain to interpret sound for the first time. Everything went perfectly. Textbook. Flawless. But halfway through the procedure, something strange happened. The heart monitor began to beep erratically. Bella's vital signs spiked, pulse racing, blood pressure climbing, and then just as suddenly stabilized. Dr. Ortiz glanced at the anesthesiologist, who looked baffled. "What was that?" Dr. Ortiz asked sharply. "I don't know. It was like her body just surged and then calmed. I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Ortiz returned to the surgery, but his hands felt unsteady. The scent of roses filled the operating room. Stronger now, undeniable. One of the nurses gasped softly. "Do you smell that?" "Focus," Dr. Ortiz snapped, though his own heart was pounding. He finished the implantation, closed the incision, and stepped back. The surgery was complete. Now they would wait. It would take weeks for the site to heal before the external processor could be activated and Bella could hear for the first time. Or so he thought. As Bella was moved to recovery, still under anesthesia, something impossible happened. Her lips began to move, softly at first, then more clearly. The recovery nurse leaned in, listening, and then turned to Dr. Ortiz with wide eyes. "Doctor, she's talking." Dr. Ortiz rushed to Bella's side. The child was still unconscious, but her mouth was forming words, whispering something he couldn't quite make out. He leaned closer, his breath catching. "Thank you. Thank you. She says thank you." And then Bella's eyes fluttered open, too soon, far too soon for someone under anesthesia, and she looked directly at Dr. Ortiz. Her gaze was clear, focused, filled with a wisdom no 6-year-old should possess. She smiled, and in a voice that shouldn't exist yet, that couldn't exist yet, she spoke. "The lady in blue is standing next to you." Dr. Ortiz stumbled backward, his heart slamming against his ribs. The room spun. The scent of roses was overwhelming now, thick and sweet and impossible to deny. He looked to where Bella was pointing, at the empty space beside him, and for one terrible, beautiful moment, he felt something. A presence, a warmth, a love so vast it terrified him. And then it was gone. Bella closed her eyes and drifted back into unconscious rest. The monitors beeped steadily. Everything returned to normal. But Dr. Samuel Ortiz stood frozen in that recovery room, his hands trembling, his certainty shattered. He didn't know what he believed anymore. But he knew, with a clarity that shook him to his core, that he had just witnessed something far beyond the reach of medicine, something sacred, something real. The days following Bella's surgery should have been a time of quiet recovery and cautious hope. Instead, they became a descent into chaos that would test Rosa Martinez's faith to its breaking point and force Dr. Samuel Ortiz to confront the limits of everything he thought he knew about the world. Bella's post-operative healing began normally enough. The incision site showed no signs of infection, her vital signs remained stable, and the surgical team scheduled her return visit for 3 weeks later, when the external processor would be fitted and activated for the first time. Dr. Ortiz, still shaken by what he had witnessed in the recovery room, threw himself into his remaining surgeries with an almost manic intensity, as if the familiar rhythm of scalpel and suture could restore the rational order of his universe. But he couldn't stop thinking about Bella's words. "The lady in blue is standing next to you." He told himself it had been the anesthesia, a hallucination, the confused utterances of a child emerging from sedation. He told himself the scent of roses had been a ventilation issue, that the strange, vital sign spike had been an equipment malfunction. He constructed a fortress of explanations, each one reasonable, each one logical. But late at night, alone in his hotel room, the fortress crumbled. He had felt something in that operating room, something that watched, something that loved, and it terrified him because it couldn't be measured, couldn't be quantified, couldn't be contained within the boundaries of his carefully ordered worldview. Rosa, meanwhile, was experiencing her own crisis of faith, or rather her lack of it. She had taken Bella home to their cramped apartment, relieved that the surgery was over but deeply unsettled by everything that had happened. Her daughter continued to speak in fragments, continued to smile at empty corners of rooms, continued to describe conversations with the lady in blue in vivid detail. Rosa wanted to believe it was real, wanted to believe that the Virgin Mary herself was watching over her child, but years of disappointment and hardship had taught her to expect nothing but more suffering. The medical bills, despite the free surgery, were mounting. The clinic had covered the procedure, but there were medications to buy, follow-up appointments to schedule, and Rosa had already missed 3 days of work. Her supervisor at the cleaning company had called twice, voice tight with irritation, reminding her that her position wasn't guaranteed if she couldn't maintain her schedule. Rosa felt the old familiar weight settling back onto her shoulders, the suffocating pressure of poverty, of single motherhood, of a world that demanded more than she could possibly give. And then, on the 5th night after the surgery, everything fell apart. Rosa woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of Bella screaming. Not crying, screaming. A sound of pure terror that sent Rosa bolting from her bed and racing into her daughter's room. Bella was sitting upright, her face pale and drenched in sweat, her eyes wide with horror. She was signing frantically, making gestures Rosa had never seen before, her small hands cutting through the air with desperate urgency. "Bella, baby, what's wrong?" Rosa grabbed her daughter's shoulders, trying to calm her, but Bella twisted away, pointing at the window. Rosa looked. There was nothing there, just darkness, just the streetlight casting shadows through the thin curtains. But Bella was inconsolable. She buried her face in her mother's chest and sobbed. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. And then, between gasps, she spoke words that made Rosa's blood run cold. "The bad man is coming. The lady says the bad man is coming." Rosa held her daughter tightly, her mind racing. What bad man? Was Bella having nightmares? Was this some kind of post-surgical trauma? She tried to soothe her, tried to convince her that everything was safe, but Bella wouldn't stop trembling. The little girl kept signing the same phrase over and over. Danger, danger, run. Rosa didn't sleep the rest of that night. She sat beside Bella's bed, watching her daughter finally drift into an exhausted, fitful sleep, and tried to make sense of what was happening. In the morning, she called the clinic. Sister Margaret answered, listened carefully to Rosa's description of the night's events, and promised to speak with Dr. Ortiz. But before anyone could intervene, Rosa's worst fears materialized. 2 days later, Rosa was at work, scrubbing the floors of a medical office building downtown when her phone rang. It was Bella's school. The voice on the other end was tense, apologetic, carefully controlled. There had been an incident. Bella was safe, but Rosa needed to come immediately. Rosa's hands went numb. She abandoned her cleaning cart in the middle of the hallway and ran, catching 2 buses and arriving at the school 45 minutes later, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. The principal met her in the office, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a grave expression. "Mrs. Martinez, please sit down." "What happened? Where's Bella?" "She's with the school counselor. She's physically fine, but..." The principal hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "A man approached the school playground during recess this afternoon. He tried to talk to several children through the fence. Bella saw him and started screaming. She ran to her teacher and was trying to communicate something, pointing at the man signing frantically. The teacher didn't understand at first, but Bella was so distressed that she called for help. By the time security arrived, the man was gone. Rosa felt her throat tighten. Who was he? Did anyone recognize him? No, but we reviewed the security footage and we've contacted the police. Mrs. Martinez, this man matches the description of someone who's been reported lurking near elementary schools in 3 different districts over the past month. The police think he may be surveilling schools, possibly planning an abduction. The room tilted. Rosa gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. You're saying Bella knew? That she saw him and knew he was dangerous? The principal's expression was troubled. I don't know how to explain it. But yes. If your daughter hadn't reacted the way she did, if she hadn't alerted the teacher, that man might have... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Rosa found Bella in the counselor's office, curled up on a small couch, her face pale but calm. When she saw her mother, she reached out and Rosa gathered her into her arms, holding her as if she could shield her from the entire world. The lady told me, Bella whispered into her mother's shoulder. She told me he was coming. She told me to scream. Rosa couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. Her daughter, her deaf daughter who shouldn't be able to hear warnings, who shouldn't be able to sense danger, had been protected by something beyond understanding. And for the first time in her life, Rosa felt the foundations of her skepticism crack open. But the darkness wasn't finished with them yet. That evening, as Rosa tried to process what had happened, she received a letter in the mail that made her stomach drop. It was from her landlord, a terse, coldly worded notice of eviction. She was 2 months behind on rent, months she had fallen behind during Bella's medical crisis, and she had 30 days to pay the full amount or vacate the apartment. The sum was impossible. $3,000. Rosa had less than $200 in her bank account. She sat at the kitchen table staring at the letter, feeling the walls closing in. She had survived so much. She had endured abandonment, poverty, the heartbreak of watching her daughter live in silence. She had kept going because she had to, because Bella needed her. But this was too much. She couldn't pay rent she didn't have. She couldn't keep her job if she kept missing shifts. She couldn't protect her daughter from predators lurking outside schools. She couldn't hold the pieces of her life together anymore. For the first time since Bella was born, Rosa broke. She buried her face in her hands and wept, deep, soul-shaking sobs that came from a place of absolute despair. She wept for the years of struggle, for the dreams she had abandoned, for the future she couldn't give her daughter. She wept until there were no tears left, until she was hollow and empty and numb. And in that moment of utter darkness, Bella appeared beside her. The little girl climbed onto her mother's lap, wrapped her small arms around Rosa's neck, and pressed her forehead against her mother's cheek. And then, in a voice so clear and certain it seemed to come from somewhere beyond the child herself, Bella spoke. Mama, the lady says you're not alone. She says she's been with you every day. She says she sees you. She says you're loved. Rosa's breath hitched. She pulled back and looked into her daughter's eyes, those wide, innocent eyes that held a knowing far beyond 6 years. Bella, how do you know that? How can you hear her? Bella smiled. She talks to my heart, Mama, not my ears. My heart. And in that small, cramped kitchen, with an eviction notice on the table and darkness pressing in from every side, Rosa Martinez finally surrendered. She had spent years trying to control everything, trying to solve every problem with sheer force of will, refusing to hope because hope had always led to disappointment. But now, with her daughter in her arms and nowhere left to turn, she let go. She didn't pray in words. She didn't know how. She simply opened her heart and whispered into the silence. If you're real, if you're really there, please help us. Please. The apartment was quiet. The night was still. Nothing dramatic happened. No visions appeared, no voices thundered from heaven. But Rosa felt something shift inside her, a softness, a warmth, a sense that she was being held by something greater than herself. It wasn't certainty. It wasn't proof. It was just the faintest whisper of peace in the midst of chaos. And Bella, still nestled in her mother's arms, looked toward the corner of the kitchen and waved. She's here, Mama, the little girl said softly. She's always here. Rosa looked where Bella was looking. She saw nothing. but for the first time she believed her daughter could. The next morning, exhausted but strangely calm, Rosa took Bella back to Santa Rita Free Clinic for a follow-up appointment. Dr. Ortiz was there, reviewing patient charts with Sister Margaret. When he saw Rosa and Bella enter, his expression flickered, something between relief and apprehension. "Mrs. Martinez, how is Bella healing?" She's okay, doctor. But I need to talk to you about something." Rosa recounted the incident at the school, the warning Bella had received, the man who had been surveilling children. Dr. Ortiz listened without interrupting, his face growing paler with each detail. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "I don't know what's happening here. I don't know how to explain any of this, but I believe you." Sister Margaret, who had been listening from across the room, stepped forward. "Doctor, may I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped into the hallway, and Rosa could hear their muffled voices through the door. When they returned, Sister Margaret's eyes were bright with something that looked like hope. "Mrs. Martinez," she said gently, "I've spoken with the Archdiocese. What's been happening with Bella, the visions, the warnings, the protection, it's beyond medical explanation. The Church has protocols for investigating potential supernatural phenomena, especially when it involves claimed apparitions of the Virgin Mary. With your permission, we'd like to document Bella's experiences and interview her, not to exploit her but to understand what's happening, and to help." Rosa felt her chest tighten. "Help how?" "The Archdiocese has an emergency assistance fund for families in crisis. If what's happening to Bella is truly a sign of divine intervention, the Church wants to ensure that you're supported, not burdened. We can help with your rent, with medical expenses, with whatever you need while we investigate." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that?" "The Church takes care of its own, Mrs. Martinez, especially when Our Lady is involved." Dr. Ortiz cleared his throat. "There's something else. I've been thinking about Bella's case constantly since the surgery. I want to move up her activation appointment. I want to see if the implant is working sooner than we planned. Normally we'd wait another 2 weeks, but given everything that's happening, I think we should try tomorrow." Rosa looked down at Bella, who was smiling peacefully, her hand resting on her mother's arm. "Will it hurt her?" "No, it's just a fitting and calibration. We'll turn on the external processor and see if she can hear. If the implant has integrated properly, she'll begin to perceive sound for the first time." He hesitated, then added softly, "I need to see this, Mrs. Martinez. I need to understand." Rosa nodded slowly. "Okay, tomorrow." That night, Rosa lay awake again, but this time she wasn't paralyzed by fear. She was waiting for the dawn. Waiting for the moment when her daughter might hear the world for the first time. Waiting to see if the impossible, the miraculous, could actually be real. Bella slept peacefully beside her, one small hand curled against her mother's chest. And in the darkness of that cramped apartment, Rosa swore she could smell it. Faint, unmistakable, achingly beautiful. Roses. The next morning would bring the miracle that would change everything. The next morning, the lady in blue would finally reveal why she had chosen a 6-year-old deaf girl to carry a message the world desperately needed to hear. The next morning, Bella Martinez would speak with the voice of heaven. The morning of April 23rd dawned clear and bright over Tucson, the desert sun casting long golden shadows across the city. Rosa Martinez woke before her alarm, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and terror she couldn't name. Today was the day. Today, Dr. Ortiz would activate Bella's cochlear implant. Today, her daughter might hear for the first time in her life. Or today they might discover that all of this, the visions, the warnings, the impossible words, had been nothing but a cruel illusion, a neurological quirk, a desperate mother's wishful thinking. Rosa dressed Bella carefully, brushing her daughter's dark hair until it shone, choosing the little girl's favorite dress. A simple blue cotton one with white flowers that Rosa's own mother had sent from Mexico years ago. Bella seemed utterly calm, humming softly to herself, that strange tuneless melody she shouldn't be able to produce. As Rosa knelt to tie her daughter's shoes, Bella placed a small hand on her mother's cheek. "Today is important, Mama," Bella said clearly, her voice carrying a weight far beyond her 6 years. "The lady says today everyone will understand." Rosa's hands trembled. "Understand what, baby?" Bella smiled. "That she never leaves us. That she's always listening, even when we can't hear her." They arrived at Santa Rita Free Clinic at 8 in the morning. The waiting room was already crowded, not with patients, but with people who had somehow heard about Bella's case. Rosa recognized some faces from the neighborhood, others from the church she had stopped attending years ago. Sister Margaret was there, along with 2 other nuns Rosa didn't know. And in the corner, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the presence of so much religious fervor, stood Dr. Samuel Ortiz. He approached Rosa immediately, his expression serious, but not unkind. "Mrs. Martinez, are you ready?" Rosa nodded, not trusting her voice. "I want to be transparent with you about what we're doing today," Dr. Ortiz continued, his clinical demeanor firmly in place as if it could shield him from the strangeness of the past weeks. "We're going to fit Bella with the external processor, the device that will capture sound and transmit it to the internal implant. Then we'll turn it on and calibrate it to her specific hearing profile. Most patients experience sound as overwhelming at first. Loud, distorted, frightening even. It takes weeks or months for the brain to learn how to interpret these new signals as meaningful sound." He paused, glancing at Bella, who was watching him with those knowing eyes. "But given everything you've described, the words she's been speaking, the responses she's shown, I honestly don't know what to expect. This case defies every protocol I know." Sister Margaret stepped forward. "Doctor, before we begin, I need to inform you that Father Thomas Brennan is here. He's the Archdiocese's appointed investigator for claimed supernatural phenomena. He'd like to observe the activation, with your permission and Mrs. Martinez's consent." Rosa turned to see a man in his 60s, wearing the black suit and Roman collar of a Catholic priest, standing near the entrance. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile, but there was something sharp in his gaze, an intelligence that suggested he was accustomed to separating truth from delusion, genuine miracles from wishful thinking. "Mrs. Martinez," Father Brennan said, approaching with careful deference, "I want you to know that the Church takes claims of Marian apparitions very seriously. We are skeptics by nature, by necessity. Most reported visions turn out to be misunderstandings, psychological phenomena, or well-intentioned but mistaken interpretations of ordinary events. But occasionally, very occasionally, we encounter something that cannot be explained away. Something real. I'm here to discern which category Bella's experiences fall into." Rosa felt defensive instincts rising. "My daughter isn't crazy. She isn't making this up." "I don't think she is," Father Brennan said gently. "That's why I'm here. May I observe?" Rosa looked at Bella, who was gazing at the priest with calm recognition. The little girl signed something, a gesture Rosa had seen many times over the past weeks, and then spoke aloud. "The lady says you have a good heart. She says you've been praying for proof." Father Brennan's composure cracked for just an instant. His eyes widened and he took a step back. Yes. Yes, I have been." Dr. Ortiz cleared his throat sharply, reasserting control over the situation. "If everyone is finished, I'd like to begin. Bella, sweetheart, come with me." They moved into the small examination room. Rosa, Bella, Dr. Ortiz, Sister Margaret, and Father Brennan. 2 audiologists who had volunteered their time were already there, setting up equipment and preparing the external processor. The room felt crowded, suffocating, charged with an expectation that made Rosa's skin prickle. Bella climbed onto the examination chair without hesitation. Dr. Ortiz knelt beside her, holding the small external device, a curved piece of technology that would sit behind her ear and connect magnetically to the implant beneath her skin. It looked impossibly delicate, impossibly complex. The culmination of decades of medical research, miniaturized into something small enough for a child. "Bella, I'm going to put this on you now," Dr. Ortiz said, even though he knew she couldn't hear him. "It might feel strange, but it won't hurt. When I turn it on, you might hear sounds you've never experienced before. I need you to tell me what you're feeling, okay?" Bella nodded and impossibly responded, "Okay, Dr. Ortiz, I'm ready." He froze, the device hovering inches from her head. You heard me?" "No," Bella said simply, "but the lady told me what you said." The room fell silent. One of the audiologists made a small sound, half gasp, half sob. Father Brennan pulled out a small notebook and began writing rapidly. Sister Margaret clasped her hands together and closed her eyes, her lips moving in silent prayer. "Doctor?" Ortiz's hands were shaking as he fitted the processor behind Bella's ear and attached the magnetic coil to her head. It connected with a soft click. He stepped back, his face pale, and nodded to the audiologist at the computer console. "Beginning activation sequence," the audiologist said, her voice tight with emotion, "starting at minimum threshold and gradually increasing." She pressed a key. The processor hummed to life, a sound so soft only those standing closest could hear it. Bella sat completely still, her eyes focused on nothing, her expression distant. 5 seconds passed. 10. Nothing happened. Dr. Ortiz felt something inside him crumble. Of course it wouldn't work. The implant had been placed correctly, the device was functioning properly, but the child's auditory processing system was too damaged, too underdeveloped. The surgery had been a success, but it couldn't create neural pathways that had never formed. Science had its limits after all. Whatever Bella had been experiencing, whatever Rosa had witnessed, it wasn't hearing. It was something else, something he would probably never understand. But it wasn't medical. It wasn't curable. He was about to tell the audiologist to abort the activation when Bella's head tilted slightly, like a bird listening to a distant song. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened in a small O of surprise, and then her face transformed, lit up with a joy so pure, so radiant that everyone in the room felt their hearts constrict. "Mama," Bella whispered, and this time the word wasn't spoken in the halting, approximate way she had been speaking. This time it was perfect, melodious, filled with the musicality of someone who could actually hear the sound leaving her own lips. "Mama, I can hear you. I can hear your heart beating. I can hear you breathing. I can hear everything." Rosa's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, her hands covering her mouth, sobs tearing from her throat. Bella turned toward her mother, tears streaming down her own face, and continued speaking in that impossibly clear voice. "I can hear the lights buzzing. I can hear people whispering. I can hear the cars outside. I can hear the wind. Mama, the world is so loud. The world is so beautiful." Dr. Ortiz stumbled backward, his professional composure completely shattered. The audiologist was openly weeping. Sister Margaret had her rosary clutched in both hands, her face radiant. Father Brennan stood frozen, his notebook forgotten, his eyes locked on Bella as if witnessing the transfiguration itself. "This isn't possible," Dr. Ortiz whispered. "The brain needs time to adapt. Weeks, months. You can't just hear and immediately process complex sound with perfect clarity. It doesn't work that way. The neural pathways don't exist. They can't exist." Bella turned to look at him, and in her gaze was a compassion far too ancient for a child. "Dr. Ortiz, the lady has been teaching me, every night, every morning. She's been showing me what sounds are, what words mean, what the world will be like when I can finally hear it. She's been preparing me." "That's impossible," Dr. Ortiz repeated, but his voice was breaking. "You can't learn to hear in dreams. You can't develop auditory processing through visions. That's not how the brain works." "Maybe not how human brains work alone," Father Brennan said quietly, stepping forward. "But with divine intervention, with grace working through neurology? Dr. Ortiz, you're a man of science. Tell me, what is the scientific explanation for what we're witnessing right now?" Dr. Ortiz opened his mouth, closed it. He had none. For the first time in his entire career, he had absolutely no explanation. Every principle of audiology, every understanding of neural development, every law of medical science was being violated in front of his eyes, and yet it was happening. Undeniably, impossibly, miraculously, it was happening. Bella slid down from the examination chair and walked to her mother, who gathered her into a crushing embrace. They held each other and wept, tears of relief, of joy, of a gratitude so overwhelming it bordered on pain. And then Bella pulled back and looked around the room at all the faces watching her. "The lady wants me to tell you something," Bella said, and her voice carried a resonance that made everyone present go absolutely still. "She says she's been appearing to me because she wants you to know that no one is forgotten. No one is too small. No one is too broken. No one is too poor. She sees every tear. She hears every prayer, even the ones you don't know how to say. Especially those ones." Father Brennan was writing frantically now, tears running down his face. "Bella, can you describe the lady? What does she look like?" Bella nodded. "She's beautiful. She has dark skin like Mama's mama. She wears a blue robe covered in stars. She has a crown, but it's made of light, not gold. Her eyes are brown and kind, and when she looks at you, you feel like you're the most important person in the whole universe. She smells like roses, but also like the desert after rain, and she's always sad and happy at the same time. Sad because people are hurting, happy because she knows God is going to fix everything eventually. That's Our Lady of Guadalupe," Sister Margaret breathed. "That's the exact description of the image in Mexico City, the tilma of Juan Diego." Rosa's head snapped up. "My grandmother, my abuela, had a picture of Guadalupe. I grew up seeing it every day in her house in Hermosillo. When she died, I couldn't keep it. I had nowhere to put it. I gave it away." Her voice broke. "I gave her away, and she still came. She still came to help us." Father Brennan knelt beside Rosa and Bella, his voice thick with emotion. "That's what she does, Mrs. Martinez. That's who she is. She's the mother who never abandons her children, even when they abandon her. Especially then." For several minutes, no one spoke. The room was filled with the sound of crying, healing, cathartic crying that released years of accumulated pain and doubt and fear. Even Dr. Ortiz, standing apart with his arms crossed and his face turned toward the wall, was quietly weeping, his entire worldview crumbling and reconstructing itself in real time. Finally, Bella spoke again. "The lady has one more thing she wants me to say." She looked directly at Dr. Ortiz. "She wants you to know that you're not supposed to understand everything. You're supposed to be excellent at what you do, and you are, but you're also supposed to stay humble. Science is a gift, but it's not the only gift. There are mysteries you'll never solve with instruments and equations, and that's okay. That's how it should be." Dr. Ortiz turned, his face ravaged with tears, and looked at this 6-year-old girl who had just delivered a theological sermon that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm just Bella," she said simply. "But she speaks through me sometimes, when it's important." Father Brennan cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. "Bella, is the lady here now? Can you see her?" Bella nodded, pointing to the corner of the room near the door. "She's standing right there. She's smiling at all of you." Everyone turned to look. The corner was empty. But as they stared, the scent of roses, that impossible, beautiful scent that had haunted the clinic for weeks, flooded the room so strong and sweet that it was almost visible, almost tangible. And for just a moment, the light in that corner seemed to shimmer, seemed to coalesce into something that might have been a form, a presence, a woman wrapped in blue and crowned with stars. And then it was gone. But no one who had been in that room would ever be the same. News of Bella's miracle spread rapidly, first through the Catholic community in Tucson, then throughout Arizona, and eventually across the country and the world. The Archdiocese launched a formal investigation, interviewing dozens of witnesses, reviewing medical records, consulting with audiologists and neurologists and theologians. Dr. Ortiz submitted a detailed report documenting the medical impossibility of what he had witnessed. concluding with a statement that would later be quoted in newspapers and religious journals worldwide. As a scientist, I cannot explain what I observed. As a human being, I cannot deny it. Bella Martinez's case defies every principle of auditory development I know. If this is not a miracle, then I have no definition for what a miracle is. Father Brennan's investigation took 6 months. He interviewed Bella multiple times, always in the presence of child psychologists to ensure she wasn't being coached or manipulated. He spoke with Rosa, with the teachers at Bella's school, with the security guard who had seen the suspicious man near the playground. He reviewed the clinic's surveillance footage, which showed on multiple occasions Bella turning to look at and interact with empty spaces, always in the same locations, always with the same expressions of joy and reverence. In his final report to the Archbishop, Father Brennan wrote, "While the Church cannot definitively declare an apparition as authentic without years of investigation and papal approval, I can state with moral certainty that something supernatural occurred in the case of Isabella Martinez. The child's detailed descriptions of Our Lady of Guadalupe match historical accounts with precision she could not have access to. Her warnings about danger were verified and potentially prevented a serious crime. Most significantly, her sudden ability to hear and process complex language immediately upon cochlear implant activation cannot be explained by any known medical or psychological mechanism. I recommend this case be forwarded to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints for further review. But more important than any official investigation was the impact on the people who heard Bella's story. Letters poured into Santa Rita Free Clinic from around the world, from parents of deaf children who found new hope, from people struggling with poverty who felt seen and valued, from skeptics whose hearts had been softened by the testimony of a 6-year-old girl and a weeping surgeon. The clinic's donation fund swelled to over $2 million, allowing them to expand their services and provide free medical care to thousands of families who had been suffering in silence. Rosa Martinez's life was transformed. The Archdiocese paid off her back rent and medical debts and offered her a full-time position as a coordinator for the clinic's family assistance program. She accepted, finally able to work a single job with reasonable hours, finally able to spend evenings with her daughter instead of scrubbing floors alone in empty buildings. She returned to the Catholic Church she had abandoned years earlier, not out of obligation, but out of profound gratitude, carrying with her a framed image of Our Lady of Guadalupe that Sister Margaret had given her, identical to the one her grandmother had owned. Samuel Ortiz underwent his own transformation, quieter but no less profound. He continued his medical practice, continued performing surgeries with the same meticulous excellence, but he no longer approached his work with the arrogant certainty that science held all answers. He began attending Mass at the small chapel attached to Santa Rita Clinic, sitting in the back pew and saying nothing. Just listening, just opening himself to the possibility of mysteries beyond measurement. 3 years after Bella's surgery, he would quietly convert to Catholicism, telling Father Brennan in his baptism interview, "I spent my entire life believing only in what I could see and quantify. Then I met a deaf girl who could hear the voice of heaven, and I realized I'd been the deaf one all along." As for Bella herself, she grew up healthy and happy, her hearing fully functional, her speech clear and beautiful. She became something of a local celebrity, though her mother carefully protected her from exploitation, declining television interviews and book deals that would have made them wealthy. Bella attended regular school, made friends, played soccer, did homework, and lived the gloriously ordinary life of a normal child. But those who knew her well, her mother, her teachers, Father Brennan, Dr. Ortiz, noticed something that never quite faded. Bella continued to see things others couldn't see, to know things she had no way of knowing, to speak words of comfort to hurting people with a wisdom far beyond her years. She never claimed the visions continued, never drew attention to her gifts, but everyone who spent time with her felt it. She lived in both worlds simultaneously, one foot planted firmly on earth and the other touching heaven. On the 5-year anniversary of her miracle, Bella returned to the bus stop on South 6th Avenue where it had all begun. She was 11 now, tall for her age, her long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her cochlear implant processor visible behind her ear. Rosa stood beside her, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and awe that hadn't diminished over the years. "Do you still see her, baby?" Rosa asked softly. "The lady in blue?" Bella was quiet for a moment, gazing at the bench where she had first encountered the presence that would change her life. Then she smiled, that radiant, knowing smile that made her look simultaneously like a child and like something eternal. "Not the same way," Bella said. "Not like before. But I don't need to see her anymore, Mama, because now I know the secret." "What secret?" Bella took her mother's hand and squeezed it gently. "She's not just in visions, she's in every moment. She's in the nurse who stayed late to help a scared patient. She's in the teacher who notices when a kid is being bullied. She's in the neighbor who brings groceries when someone is sick. She's in you, Mama, in the way you fought for me when everything was impossible. She's everywhere, in everyone who chooses love when they could choose fear. You just have to know how to look." Rosa pulled her daughter close, tears streaming down her face. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise," Bella said, laughing. "I'm just listening. That's all any of us have to do. Just listen." A city bus pulled up to the stop, its doors hissing open. But Rosa and Bella didn't board. They stood together on that dusty corner, in the shade of the mesquite tree, in the place where heaven and earth had touched, and they breathed in the ordinary miracle of another morning, another chance, another moment of grace. And if anyone had been watching closely, if anyone had known what to look for, they might have noticed the faint scent of roses drifting through the desert air. They might have seen the way the light seemed to shimmer, just for an instant, around the mother and daughter standing together. They might have felt, for just a heartbeat, the overwhelming presence of a love too vast for words. But most people hurried past, focused on their phones, their schedules, their problems. They didn't notice. They didn't see. And that was okay. That was how it usually worked, because Our Lady doesn't need everyone to see. She just needs someone to listen. One small voice, one open heart, one person willing to believe that even in the darkest moments, even in the deepest silence, we are never, ever alone. She sees you. She hears you. She knows your name. And she is standing right beside you, wearing blue, crowned with stars, smelling of roses, waiting for you to finally turn around and recognize that the miracle you've been praying for has been there all along. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles are real, that suffering has meaning, and that no prayer goes unheard. Subscribe to receive daily stories of hope, faith, and the extraordinary ways Our Lady continues to walk among us, transforming ordinary moments into encounters with the divine. Because the world needs to know, she has never left us. She is here. She has always been here. And she is waiting for you to say yes.